Alrighty, North Coast, what would your time and place be? If you were offered one opportunity that you could go back and change an event in your life, you could have a redo one time in your life, what would your event be? Was it something you said that you've regretted that maybe still makes conflict amongst relationships or family? Maybe it was something you didn't say, something that was left unsaid. Was there something you've done that you've regretted? Not something. Out of the many things you've done that you've regretted, what would be the one you'd go back? Is it something you didn't do? You offer me, Chris, what would be your one time in one place? I would say 1988 to 92. That's what I'd love to go back. What would it be for you? Have you ever thought about it? And not about the regrets, about the bad things. Have you ever regretted not doing something? Have you heard the crazy stuff about what people invested in or stocks, or if I would have only known then what I know now? Oh my gosh, how different life would have been. Was there an opportunity that came your way that you didn't take it for whatever reason, and now you look back and you're just kicking yourself for? If only my dad would have realized that the perfect graduation present for me, the year that I graduated, was $10,000 in Microsoft stocks. The IPO and the stocks came out the year I graduated. That $10,000 in Microsoft today would have been worth $3.3 million. Dad! Do you realize if you would have invested just $1,000 in Apple stock back in 1980, today you would have $272,000 in Apple stock? You hear these incredible stories. One like Peter Thiel invested $500,000 in something called Facebook in 2005. 7 years later, he sold 80% of his shares for $400 million. Oh, I hate that guy. Are you kidding me? I was just a piece of that. And that was all back in 2005. You guys ever heard of a guy named Asa Candler? Neither did I. That's what Yahoo and Google's for, if I could have invested in them. Asa Candler, in 1891, bailed out a Southern pharmacist who claimed to have a magic elixir that could cure not only headaches, but other cerebral trauma. Unfortunately, the Southern pharmacist also had many headaches and came to the realization that his elixir wasn't a cure for headaches. It wasn't curing his. But Asa Candler had another idea for this elixir. And in 1891, Asa Candler purchased this pharmacist elixir for $2,300. Today, you know that drug by the name Coca-Cola. For $2,300, he bought Coca-Cola. Why isn't that my great-grandfather? Well, I'd be a Candler, no problem. But there's times and places we would go back and go, oh, I want to redo on that. Or, oh, if only I would have known. Or, man, do you know what I wish I would have, if I would have known back then. One of the things I absolutely love about the Bible and Jesus' teaching is that he's not going to allow for any of that. None of that. He says, man, when you get to heaven, he's going to have nothing but a bunch of, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. We're not going to walk into heaven and go, man, I wish I would have known. How come no one told me? Oh, if only I would have. If you have those, it's on your own doing, not on his. We come to that part today where he stops the crowd. He looks at his followers and he goes, man, I got to tell you. It's almost a part two if you were here last week. Last week we looked at this parable and we called it Heaven's Cheat Sheet. We're going to get the test ahead of time. And Jesus stopped and just told his followers, look, let me tell you what heaven's going to be like. Let me tell you the question that's going to be asked of you. You're going to need to know this ahead of time. This is almost a part two of it. He goes, now that you know what heaven's going to be like, let me tell you what you got to do now. And Jesus isn't going to let us finish this life not knowing what we're going to be graded on. He's going to give us the investments ahead of time. It's why if you want to take out a note sheet and follow along with us today, there in your bulletin, I've kind of called this financial planning by Jesus. And yet it's more than financial planning. You might want to cross out financial and just put life planning by Jesus. That's a much better definition for this. We're going to pick up this story in Luke chapter 16. If you got a Bible, an old-fashioned pagey one like mine, you can go to the back and flip around, look for the guys' names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all big books. We're in Luke 16. If you got your smartphone, click on your Bible app, push on Luke, push on 16, and you're there. It's that easy. We're in Luke chapter 16. While you're turning there, let me give a shout out to Fallbrook. And man, they're about to get into this amazing building process that's going on and project there. Hopefully sometime by the end of this month, the county board's going to look at everything we've turned in our plans. And they've got a great building that they bought. And Fallbrook's about to launch into an amazing new chapter. Love what you guys are doing out there and how you're reaching your community. Say hi to Carlsbad and San Marcos and Escondido and Green Oak and Kailua. To all of you that are watching on other campuses and venues. And I just want to say this, especially on today, thank you so much for you men and women that are overseas and you're deployed right now. And yet you're still clicking in, you're watching, you're listening. This has become your church when you're far from home and far from family. Not only are we incredibly honored, just humbled and honored that you would do that and to play your role. But as a huge military church, we just want to thank you. You and your family for your sacrifice, for your service on behalf of us and others, especially in this world that we live in today. Love that you were there. I know you're watching, so you can't tell, but that was a standing ovation, and people are throwing things in the air for you. It was amazing. You should have been here. We're good. It was a great applause. Luke chapter 16, here we go. It's a good story. Shut up. We don't have that much time. Now, Jesus told his disciples, circle, underline, highlight disciples. This is a teaching for his followers. This is a teaching, the word we use today is Christians, Christians, ones who want to be like Christ. So right off the bat, I just got to tell you, for those of you that are Christians, he's going to give you the answer ahead of time. For those of you that say, I'm a Christ follower, he goes, okay, then this is what your life is about. So if you call yourself a Christian, this is for you. No questions asked. These words are in red. You got to get this. If you've been hanging out with us at North Coast and one of our campuses or venues and you go, I'm not a Christian, I'm just kind of watching this. I've been coming for a few weeks or maybe today's your first day. Maybe a friend's invited you or brought you. Man, you picked a great day to be here because of this. You're going to find out what Christianity is supposed to be about. Before you ever sign on the dotted line, before ever you want to jump in, you're going to find out from Christ himself, from Jesus Christ, this is what his followers should be about. You're going to get the fine print ahead of time before you ever sign the contract. This is for followers. You call yourself a Christian. It's for his disciples. He goes, let me tell you a story. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. I've underlined that. Wasting his possessions. So he called him in and he asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Now the manager said to himself, what am I going to do? My master's taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm too ashamed to beg. I know what I'm going to do. So that when I lose my job, there will be people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. And he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? Well, I owe 800 gallons of olive oils, he replied. And the manager told him, take out your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. You got a 50% off sale going on today on your debt. Then he called in the second. Now, how much do you owe? Well, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. And he told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own than the people of light. Now I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with just a very little is also going to be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who's going to trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who's going to give you property of your own? You see, no servant can serve two masters. Either they're going to hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now the Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. Even though he's talking to his followers, even though this is a story for disciples, the Pharisees, the religious leaders at the time, they're hanging out and they're listening. Oh, by chapter 16, there are a lot of ears directed at Jesus. By chapter 16, there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out, what is this guy about? Rumors have it he can walk on water. He can feed 5,000 people out of one lunchbox. He can talk to the storm and it listens. And he's got a following like no other. And so there's other ears listening in. And it's the religious. It's those with perfect church attendance. It's those that know the Bible. It's those that have a better walk with God. It's those that tend to look at the rest of the world and see themselves as better than. They hear this story and they sneered at Jesus. That term there is they lifted up their noses at it. So he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. Oh, you religious, you're the ones that grade yourselves according to others, but God knows your heart. And the stuff that you're grading yourself on is better than God actually hates. Yeah, this story is also for you. I love this story. Like so many Jesus stories, it has these little twists and turns in it that I look at and go, seriously? Did we just see a crooked guy do some crooked business and get patted on the back for it? Yeah. And you're like, really, for 16 chapters, Jesus has been telling us to live an ethical life. Jesus has been telling us not to lie, not to cheat, to love others. And now he says, hey, here's the hero, a crooked dude who rips off people. Be more like that. No, not at all. In fact, he calls him the dishonest manager. What is applauded in this story is not the dishonesty. It's the shrewdness this guy acted in. Did you get the picture? Man, there is a guy that must own a ton of real estate. There's a guy that owns a ton of property. For guys to have debt that are 1,000 barrels and 800 bushels for him, man, he has got people farming just hundreds of acres. Now remember, these stories of Jesus, they're fictional. They're parables. They're fictional stories that have a heavenly meaning. So don't get caught up in, well, back then, how much land could, it's a made-up story. But word gets to him. Hey, you know the guy that you have managing all your stuff? Oh, yeah. Pretty good job, huh? No, not at all. You may want to take a closer look at the books. You may want to go down and do some asking about how things are going. This guy has been ripping you off. In fact, I love that very first line. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. You have a guy in charge of your stuff that is wasting it. But when he gets enough facts, he calls the guy in. And just like the story said, man, this guy's like, I'm done. This is the only job I have. What am I going to do? Go dig ditches, be manual labor? I'm not good at manual labor. I can't get a job doing that. No one's going to hire me to shovel anything. I'm too ashamed to beg. And man, he sobered up quickly. Someone lit a fire under him. I know what I'm going to do. I'm about to enter the next chapter of my life and the next chapter of my career, whatever it is. I got to make sure someone's going to be favorable to me. Someone's going to accept me. So he called in all the debtors and he made a line. Bill, thanks for coming in today. I know it's short notice. This is a good day for you, good day for me. Shut up and sit down. I don't have much time. How much do you owe? 1,000. Not anymore. It's 500. Could you make 500 work? Yeah, I could totally make. Get it in today and you're done. Thanks, man. No problem. I'll probably be knocking on your door next week. Jerry, come on in. Jerry, sit down. What do you owe? I owe 800 bushels, but I'm a little short this week. Can you only do 600? Yeah, I could probably do 600, make it right now. Let's go. Jerry's like, thanks, man. We ought to hang out sometime. I think that will happen. Next, they come on in. And one after another, man, he just starts marking it down. And I know the point of the story, you're looking at it going, he's ripping off the guy even more. He's ripping off the owner even more. Yeah. What's being commended is not the dishonesty. Man, this guy took every opportunity on his last day with what he had and said, I'm going to make sure this next chapter is going to go well for me. I'm going to make some friends that when I leave this place, someone's going to be, hey, I owe you one. Yes, you do. You owe me about 500 bushels of one. I need a little job right now. And I love these stories of Jesus because at the end of it, he knows who's listening. It's the religious perfect attenders. It's the spiritual elite that look at this and go, man, I'm not going that far. Sneered at Jesus. And he loves picking a dishonest manager and saying, this guy is to be praised more than you. Oh, that one's going to sting a little bit. No wonder they want to kill the guy. What's it mean for us today? On this life planning by Jesus, I simply want you to take out your notes and I want you to write this down. Right off the bat, he's just making us aware. Man, don't fall for fool's gold. With the life you have, don't waste it. Number one is this: the end of our life is a myth. Plan for beyond death. The end of our life is a myth. Plan for beyond death. So many times we try to plan our life to death. We try to make sure, at least someone did, to get an education, maybe even get a better education, maybe go on and get further education, maybe even get a grad degree in education. Try to set ourselves up to have the best opportunity, the best job, or use our God-given gifts and experience and opportunities to create some sort of income for ourselves. Then the goal is to accumulate some sort of wealth, and at least enough of it, that when we are done, because physically, mentally, our capacity can no longer work, to make sure that we're not left destitute and homeless, to make sure that the end of our life, we're going to be a little bit okay. The end of our life, we can be taken care of, because some point we got to get all this done before we die. And Jesus constantly, in these pages of red letters, just like we saw last week, just pulls the plug on that entire myth. He goes, you realize, don't you? Please let me get you to realize you'll never die, right? You do understand that. He's talking to his disciples, Christians. Oh, you'll get rid of this earthly body. You'll be done with this earthly portion of life. This part of Chris Brown that you see is not going to be my eternal body. Woo-hoo-hoo. That's why I'm not putting much work in it now. It's temporary. It's like the pop-up tent. It's got a rip in it. We don't repair that. It's the tent. If the house needs fixing, we'll do something with the house. We don't work on the tent. This is just a tent, the Bible says. It's my earthly dwelling. One day this heart's going to stop beating. One day I'm going to take my last breath. One day this body is done with, but I don't die. We're eternal beings. And he's trying to get an illustration here. Let me show you about a guy that understood his temporary position was so temporary. He's about to get fired. You're about to die. It's good news. If you're like, I hope we have a message today that cheers me up. Write this down. I'm about to die. Maybe 5 years and maybe 50 years. You may be able to eke out another 60 years. You're about to die. The short little timeline of your life is on earth. We live forever. We have eternity. And he goes, please don't tell me you're planning your life to here. Please don't tell me that you're using your gifts, your talents, your abilities for here. Please don't tell me you're thinking you're using what you have now and you're trying to plan to the point of death. You're a Christian. You're eternal. You're not going to die. Why would you spend everything here? It's like raising a child, planning and telling them they only live to 15. So that's a horrible thing to do to a kid. Yeah. Their entire life telling them, hey, you only get to 15. Then that 16th birthday, they don't know what to do. It's like, well, that'd be the stupidest parenting move ever, of course. And Jesus is saying, why are you trying to plan this part as if this is it? He goes, I want you to think that next chapter. Let me tell you a story about a guy that starts thinking next chapter. And he does this incredibly shrewdly. He handles this well. Most people plan to death. He goes, man, that is foolish. That is foolish. Let me give you number 2. The only investments that count are people. Therefore, the only investments that count are people. The only things going with me after this life, the only things I'm investing in this life that will go with me are people. My 7-iron's not going with me. Even though that and my 3-wood are really the only 2 clubs I use in the entire bag. Occasionally a putter, but usually I'm not on the green. It's not going with me. The little rack I have in my garage that holds all my rod and reels, not going with me. I know. Bank accounts, not going with me. Mutual fund, not going with me. The only thing in my life that will be there are people. Now, I still have golf clubs. I still have rod and reels. I still have some investments. I still have a bank account. It's not that those things are bad. He's just putting it all in the priority. This is for Christians. Understand how this game is supposed to be played now. He goes, let me tell you what to invest in. Man, you thought Microsoft was a good deal? Shut up. Man, you wish your grandfather would have bought Coca-Cola? And he goes, man, let me give you something better than that. You do realize that all throughout the Bible, Jesus asks us to be wealthy. That doesn't really sound right. Jesus wants us to be rich. Now, let me rephrase that. Jesus wants us to be wildly successful and crazy rich. He begs us. Store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where rust can't take anything from it, where thieves can't break in and steal, where moths can't destroy. He goes, you realize we have a God that wants us to be wildly successful and incredibly wealthy. He goes, just don't put it here. It ain't going with you. Store up for yourself treasures in heaven. He goes, man, it's going to be awesome. The only thing that's going with us are people. This guy knew he was going to be called to account. He knew he wasted his possessions up to this point. He knew he had to take this seriously. He took advantage of his present situation to make sure there's going to be people there that are going to greet him. I love the way Jesus put this. In verse 9, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Use what you have now to invest in people and relationships, so that when you get to heaven, there's going to be someone there to greet you. You go, Chris, do we have to do this? If I don't do any of this, am I still a Christian? Yeah, you may still get to heaven, but there'll be no one there to greet you. They're like, who lives down on that lonely street? That guy. How come there's no one around him? Because he didn't invest in anyone here. He goes, you're going to want to get to heaven, and there's going to be people there that because of your influence, because your fingerprints were part of whatever brought them to Christ, because of your time, because of your talents, because of your possessions, because of your influence, the population of heaven is going to be different. He goes, I promise you, you're going to want to be there and know that you use whatever you had in your temporary stuff here to invest in people that are going to be there. That's what's commended about this guy. That everything we have is simply a tool. How are we investing in that in people? So here's, every time I talk on this, I feel like there's this mental pushback from people that go, as long as I make it to heaven. I mean, hey, I don't know, it was for overachievers that really want to overachieve in this life. We're all going to get to heaven. If we're all going to get to heaven, what does this matter? Because I think there's still some of you that have this understanding that there's equality in heaven. And I don't know where you get that from. I think I do know where you get that from, cartoons. Because every time the three little pigs went down, I mean, they're all on clouds, the same size cloud and the same size harp. I mean, we all saw the cartoons growing up. And I think our theology, our understanding of heaven comes from cartoons. Because if you read the Bible, nowhere does it say there's equality in heaven. In fact, everything in the Bible that talks about heaven says there's going to be great inequality. Man, if you think there's some inequality here on earth, just wait till heaven. Heaven's going to be the place of greatest inequality you've ever seen. I put more verses under this point than we've ever had in the history of fill in the blanks at North Coast. Because I know this is going to bug some of you. Some of you still right now are like, no, there's fairness in heaven. Of course there's fairness in heaven. You're going to get what you deserve. You're not going to get hell if you're a Christ follower because you've accepted Christ. He's washed you clean. He goes, Chris, I no longer see you as a sinner. You're a saint. Welcome. But now I'm going to reward you according to what you deserve. That is fairness, which means great inequality. I want you to write this down. This life is simply a resume for what we do in eternity. This life is simply a resume for what we get to do in eternity. And I would even write next to it, and what we get to have in eternity. And I gave you 3 lines of small print verses for those of you that don't like what I'm saying right now. So you don't have to argue with me. Go argue with the Bible. Most of this is in red letters. It's what Jesus talked about last week when we read his parable of the minas. If you missed last week, how dare you, but I'll catch you up real quick. He says, let me tell you what the heaven's going to be like. It's about a king that's going to go away for a while. And just before he leaves, he lines up his servants and he gives them each a mina, each is a sum, a measurement of wealth. He goes, put this to work on my behalf. And when I come back, I want to see what you've gained with it. And we talked about a God that believes in us more than we even believe in him. A God that says, I'm entrusting you with this life because I know you're going to use it the right way. And he goes away. And in the end, he will come and say, what did you gain with this life? And one guy walked up and said, sir, I used your mina and I multiplied it by 5. And Jesus says, well done, good and faithful servant. Because you multiplied it by 5, I put you in charge of 5 cities. The next guy comes and says, sir, I took your mind and I made 10. Well done, good and faithful. Because you made 10, I'm going to put you in charge of 10 cities. And the next guy came and said, I just sat on my life. I used it for my own possessions and worth. I really didn't do much for you at all. He goes, great, I'm taking what you have and I'm giving it to those that did something with it. That's fair. And Jesus says, that's going to be heaven. And now he tells a story. He goes, let me tell you how you should be using that mina. Let me tell you what you're doing it. Do you see when Jesus says, let me tell you about heaven? He rewards those that were faithful service here with more service. He says, if you were a good manager here, you get to manage there. Has it ever dawned on you that heaven is going to be a hierarchy of administration? That heaven is going to have so many people, and I don't understand the place of heaven. My little earthly peon mind cannot even fathom it. But I do know that Revelation says there's also going to be a new earth, a sinless earth. And those of us that were with God are going to rule in heaven and also rule on the earth. And every time Jesus talks about heaven, he uses words like crowns, ruling, thrones, reigning with him. Everything's management. Everything's administration. Now, this is good news for some of you that, like me, grew up and you thought heaven's going to be pretty boring. You're going to sit on a large wooden pew that fits the world with a hymn book that never ends. And you're like, oh, it beats hell, but only by temperature ratings. No, that's not heaven. The Bible has a lot to say about slothfulness, about laziness. None of it good. So why would heaven be eternal laziness? Well, laziness gets really boring and unhealthy after a while, let alone eternity. I put all the verses there for you to read. There is no equality in heaven. Everything we do here is a resume for what we're going to do there, what job, what assignment. And how we do this life depends on what type of wealth surrounds us in heaven. That's why Jesus said, store up for yourself treasures in heavens. It's what you do here depends on what you're getting there. There is an incredible reward system. And if you think this earth has a good reward system, man, wait to heaven. He goes, you don't want to get there and not have people there to greet you. You don't want to walk in and realize, wow, you know what I wish I would have invested in? Yep. You know, back in 2016, if I would have just invested a little bit of, yep. And he gives us the portfolio ahead of time. Man, I love this. It's one of the reasons why I love working in a place like North Coast. I am hearing daily story after story about North Coasters that got involved in this area, that's doing this ministry, that's reaching out to these people, that's doing stuff, whether it's stuff in our local community, with the homeless teen shelters, with making lunches for people, with battered and abused women, whether it's with orphans, whether it's with people that are in North Coast that are doing water wells overseas, whether it's those that are buying bikes for pastors in India so they have some mode of transportation, whether it's people that are doing clothing. It is amazing the stories of North Coasters that get this, that sit down and go, this is what I'm about. I mean, you can't fix everything, but this is our little piece of the pie. This is what we're about. This is what our time, treasures, and talents are going into. It's absolutely amazing. And so Thursday, I'm in my office, and one of our video guys came in and said, hey, did you see this? And I go, what is it? And he goes, San Marcos Escondido made a video of one of their couples and just what they're involved in. I just thought you'd like to see it. And so I watched this video that our San Marcos Escondido campus made from one of their couples. They kind of do their own your stories out there. And I looked at it and I immediately called Jay, the campus pastor, and I said, Jay, you can't use this video. He's like, seriously? I go, no, man, you can't show that. He's all, why? I go, because that is exactly what I'm talking about this weekend, and I'm going to use it in my message for everybody. Can you find out if that's okay with them? So he called Alex and Melissa, an all-star couple. They've been here 7 years, I think growth group leaders for the last 6 years, something like that. Alex is a teacher at San Marcos High School. Melissa was working part-time, but now no longer works with the kids that they have. But Melissa takes charge of the 1-year-old classroom at San Marcos Escondido. That's what she does on the weekends. And this is their story. One couple from North Coast that decided their little piece of the pie, this is what they decided to do.
My name is Alex Turner, and this is my wife, Melissa. We met at Cal Poly. We both went to college there, and we've been married for 12 years next week.
Next week.
We had some friends that started the process of foster to adopt and told us about a local agency. So we went to an orientation meeting, and we found it to be a great fit. So we started the process when Miles was 2, and then when he was 4, we were matched with one little girl named Emma. Not even probably a week later, I found out I was pregnant. So we were thinking, wow, we're gonna have not 3 but 4 kids. And then a month later, our social worker called and said that Emma, her half-sister, was gonna be available to foster also, would be willing to take her in. And so a month later, we took in her sister Dominice.
There were a lot of fears, especially initially when we started this process about, what are we going to do financially? I'm a teacher. Melissa was working part-time with an investment firm and full-time at home. And the idea is that we were doing what we could with 2 kids. What are we going to do now when we have 5?
We've had to rely so much on the Holy Spirit to give us the wisdom and the patience and the energy to raise these children. And so more than any other time in our life, just our dependence on God has been just so much stronger and so much deeper.
We're doing something that we know is beyond ourselves, and it might be difficult today, but it's for something so much more.
But it's amazing how God prepared us and our family, and really the surprise birth of Noah was such a blessing for Dominice, especially for her to see me pregnant the whole time and to welcome her brother into this world, to be there for the birth, to know him from the very beginning, made her feel like she truly was a part of our family. You can't let fear stop you if that is what God is calling you to. And there were many times where I'm like, what are we doing? Like, our lives are good, we're comfortable, and yet we never want to be comfortable in our walk with God. God has given us this one life to live for Him in the best way possible, to bring as many people into His family. And for us, adoption was something so clearly He was calling us into, that to not do what would be disobedience. We have provided a family, forever family, for these 2 precious girls, but more than that, God has transformed us through this process in a way that He never would have if we said no. So it's not like we've rescued these kids by any means. It's so much more than that He has transformed our whole entire family of 7. When the girls came into our home, they had never been to church. They had no idea who Jesus was. And now Dominice asked Jesus to live in her heart, and she knows just a ton of Bible verses and loves going to church, and the volunteers that are church really made a huge difference in their lives.
They are our daughters just as our sons are our sons.
And they're on loan to us from God for this short time on earth. And we've committed ourselves. We took an oath in that courtroom to raise them as our own. And that's exactly what they are. They're a Turner and will always be a Turner.
Alex and Melissa out in San Marcos, I hope that people have told you that what you guys are doing is stupid. You don't have the finances to pull that off. There's no way you're going to come up with 3 college tuitions, let alone now 5 college funds on a teacher's salary and a stay-at-home mom. You realize there's no way you're going to have retirement like you could have had retirement, right? I mean, do you realize what you've just done with your life? And they would have stopped you right there and said, that's just the point. It was never our life. We were called to manage His life, not make it ours. And I love those stories. I love the stories that sit in all the rows here at North Coast of people that looked at their stuff and realized it's not my stuff. This life is simply a resume for the rest of your life. And if you're planning this life to death, that's fool's gold. And you're going to get to the other side and go, man, you know what I wish I would have invested in? And Jesus would have said, it's in red letters. Man, I gave you the answers to this one ahead of time. Don't come to me about it. It's why there in verse 10, he simply says, whoever can be trusted with very little, like a teacher's salary, can also be trusted with much. Whoever dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And if you have not been trustworthy in handling your worldly wealth, your temporary stuff, who's going to trust you with true riches? God says, if I can't trust you with the temporary stuff, how am I ever going to give you great things in heaven? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, because this isn't your life, who's going to give you property of your own? Everything we do here is a resume for eternity. The position we will have, what we will manage, what we will do, and what God is going to surround us with. Please understand, go home and read all the verses before you write me a letter. There's no equality in heaven. It's why so many times we go, oh, if I get this job, you know what, if we can get this lawsuit, you know what, if I can get this income, then I'm going to start giving, then I'm going to start doing. He goes, look, if you can't be trustworthy with little, you're not going to be trustworthy with much. If I can't trust you at minimum wage, there's no way I'm going to trust you with a six-figure income. If I can't trust you with what you have now and you think I'm going to bless God later, he goes, no, it starts with what you have now. This isn't a parable against the rich or against riches. It's not bad to have. How do you see what you have? He said it's a heart condition. You're only going to serve God or you're going to serve your material possessions. Which one do you sacrifice for? That's how you know what you're serving. Which one are you sacrificing for? Material possessions or God? You're going to love one and hate the other. And you go, well, I don't hate God. He uses his extreme, just like following God. He says no one can follow God unless they hate their mother and father. Well, of course, he doesn't want you to hate your father and mother. He always uses these extremes to show there is such a clear-cut first, there is no second on this. You can't serve both. So as we wrap this up, I get to the end and I realize, okay, now there's the story. What do we do with it? If I was walking out in the plaza now on the Vista campus and one of you came up and said, oh, that's a cool story. I've always heard the dishonest guy got pat on the back. I never understood why. Man, thanks. But Chris, how do I know if I'm doing this? How do I start investing in kingdom things instead of my things? Where do you start in something like this? I'd probably grab a table in the plaza and pull up a chair. I'd probably buy you a coffee because they're out in the cart. They're free. It says donations, but 80% of you think it's free. And so we're going to sit down. Sometime he witty. And I'll get to, I didn't like to comment about coffee. I come here because it's free for you. Let me give you 3 tips for investing wisely. If it was just you and me and we're sitting in the plaza and you say, Chris, how am I supposed to do this? I would probably say, let me tell you what Amy and I are doing, and I'm not saying that's the right way, it's only right for us. But let me tell you how we started on this journey as a couple, long before we had kids and long before we had a decent income. At $16,000 a year was my salary for a youth pastor. She was in a grad program. We had $86,000 in student loans. Let me tell you where it started. Number 1, be strategic about your investments and set goals. Be strategic about your investments and set goals. Jesus says, you know, people of this world are more shrewd in how they're handling this life than people of light. Jesus goes, I can't believe that people are more strategic with their money here, that non-believers are more strategic financially in this life than people that understand eternity. He goes, you've got to be more strategic with eternal things than with temporary things. Any financial planner would sit down with you and say, okay, let's be strategic. Let's start setting goals. For Amy and I, right off the bat, we just said, we're going to tithe. I know it's an Old Testament, 10%, but everything I read in the New Testament, God says give above and beyond and even more generous. I don't think he's cut that much. So I said right off the bat, I can't believe God has given me everything I need for life and he's only asking 10%. That's ridiculous. And you're going to go, well, here's the church talking about giving. No, remember, third word in, this is to his disciples. This is about getting your heart. I would tell you this, in fact, you might want to write it down. Tithing is the antidote to the poison of materialism. Tithing is what Amy and I have used to break materialism. We're right off the bat, we say, God, this is all about you, and so it's yours. We're right off the bat. We don't wait till the end of the month because there was really not much left for him at the end of the month, especially at $16,000 a year. Right off the bat, I said, you know what? Let's honor God with everything we have and say it's yours. And now here's our goal. Babe, if there's a day that we could go to 15%, let's try to get to 15% one day. And then, babe, if there's a day we could try to get to 20%, let's see if we can get to 20% one day. I believe in starting at the local church because Jesus left the local church. That's his plan A. And if it was just you and I talking over coffee, I would tell you there's a lot of great organizations and a lot of great ministries. But if the church was doing its job, there wouldn't have to be any other ministries. And I believe in the church I go to, I want to be a part of what it's doing, not just an attender. And so that's why we start there. I would go on and say, you know what? Once the salary started to grow and once life and blessings started to come, here's what we decided to do. There's things on our hearts. Kids were on our heart. We loved our kids, and we realized that 98% of the kids in the world will never grow up like ours. So we found Compassion International 7 years ago because they work only through the local church in third world countries. And we sponsored 3 kids. So every month we sponsor 3 kids. Each of our kids write letters back and forth to our Compassion kids. I wanted to be involved in something just outside of what I was currently doing. We also had reading the Bible and said we need to meet needs, physical needs. But I wanted them to be met spiritually. So when a couple from the Edge founded an organization called Outside the Bowl, we jumped on it. And I said, that's where I want to give my time and resources. I'm going to be a spokesman for that group. I'm going to give my leadership gifts to that group. 2 weeks ago, I was down in Jalisco, Mexico. We opened our 7th super kitchen down there. And I was part of the ribbon cutting ceremony in that. I went out to the poor that lived outside the dump where the black water runs from under the hill because of all the erosion of the tires. And I sat there and I watched kids play in it, and I realized, man, I got a part in the ministries that are going to reach these kids through food. That's what I want to be a part of in my life. We sat down on top of that and said, I got a heart for the homeless, the widows, the orphans in our community. Because of my time up in LA, I worked a lot with the Union Rescue Mission. That just seemed to be in my path. So we try to give to the Union Rescue Mission when we can on top of that. I want to be a part of meeting needs here. You see, I've kind of diversified my portfolio. I picture myself one day, Jesus is going to say, what'd you do with your mina? And I want to open up a ministry mutual fund and go, here's where I was involved in the church. And then we did this and invested here and invested here and invested here and invested here. And it's sort of a mutual fund. So Amy and I look at it and go, let's do that. Our kids could have a much better college fund, especially since I just started 2 years ago with teenagers. But I think this is going to outlast them. I would look at you number 2 and then just go, and then here's what I need you to do with your influence. Start with one person in mind. If it was just you and I with Starbucks, I would just say, who is in your path for a reason? Who is in your sphere of influence for a reason? A lot of times Christians are like, oh, I just love everyone. Oh, I'm being a light to everyone. I think loving everyone is a great excuse not to love someone. Who has God got in your sphere of influence? And you may be the only Jesus in their life. They're not going to listen to me. I'm not going to reach them. And I would ask you to start with one person and just start praying about God, open a door. In our conversations, I'm going to pursue them like this shrewd manager. I'm going to pursue people now. I'm going to use intentionally my time, my talents, my wealth, my influence to pursue some people. Here's the one I'm starting with. God opened the doors in conversations in their life and mine where I can just drip in, well, here's what I found in my marriage. Well, here's what I found that's helped us. Well, here's what I'm doing when I got in that situation. Why don't you come and see? It may be an amazing day, the day that you stand in heaven. But I tell you what's going to be sad when you look around and realize you brought no one with you. And it was the only thing that counted. Start with one. And thirdly, I would say this. Investing is much easier when we realize it isn't our stuff. It isn't our money. You realize investing is a whole lot easier when it's not your money, right? That's what I loved about this guy. What do you owe? 1,000 gallons? Cut it down to 500. What's he care? It's not his gallons. What do you owe? 800 bushels? Cut it down to 600. It ain't his stuff. Oh, it's easy to do that when it's not your stuff. This life becomes much easier when, like the Turners, you realize it's not your stuff and the purpose for it. And this is where you're going to look at me and say, Chris, how do I get to the point where I don't see this as mine? I say, man, you ask good questions. I would say this. Number one, start praying every day, just giving thanks for what you have. Start praying every day, just giving thanks for what you have. When every day you drive away from that house and you're saying, God, thanks for what I'm driving today. Thanks for what I'm leaving behind. Thanks for what I have. Thanks for what's behind this little plastic bank card that's in my wallet. When you start thanking God for things, what you mentally and spiritually start doing is releasing the hold that you physically have on your stuff. You just start acknowledging daily, it's not mine, it's not mine, it's not mine. Pretty soon, you're going to start believing it's not yours. The heart's going to follow the mind. And I would say just start thanking God every day for everything you have and letting him know that you know it's his, even though you don't really buy into it yet. Just start going down that path. And then I would challenge you, find some place to start giving it away and seeing what happens to it. When you have the joy of seeing what little I give and what it is doing in lives of people, that becomes contagious eternally. When you start investing and you start seeing the dividends come back, the payoff, oh, you're going to want to continue that. When we started doing little things and seeing the difference it made in some lives, the $30 a month, and we saved a kid and his family from poverty, gave him schooling, clothing, medical, got him into a church, got him in. I'm like, holy cow, we did that? Let's get another kid. Let's get another kid. Just start releasing something. It's why I hate the conversations. I can do this one-on-one because you're fictional. So if there's any conviction, it's from the Spirit. With the people that go, oh, you know, Chris, when I die, I've left it all to the church. Well, you get no points for that. One, you don't have the joy in seeing what your wealth was doing eternally on earth. Well, what's the fun in that? And two, so you're telling me you're going to use it for security up to the point you die, and then God can have it. So it was never his. It was yours up to the point of your death. I don't think you get points for that. That was yours. Use it now. The joy that Amy and I have, even in raising 3 kids and what we do here and saying, look what we're involved with. Oh, it became contagious. And on top of that, we just said, now let's live generously. Our stuff has got to be their stuff. Whoever wants it, whoever needs it, let's try to be generous. It started small at $16,000 a year salary in a one-room apartment with $86,000 in student loans. And we said, we can't afford to do this. And I remember the conversation that night, right after we got married, was we can't afford not to do this. If he can't trust us in little, he will never trust us with much. And if he can't trust us with his possessions here, he'll never give us ours there. Let's just start now with little. It was a couple of years back now that Amy took the girls out for a night. And so I looked at Bear. He was about 5. And I said, all right, Bear, you and I, man's night. What do you want to do? He's all, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese. I go, no, seriously. We want to go to Slater's 50 bacon burger, 50 meat. Let's do something we can do. And he's all, Dad, I want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And I'm like, oh, go to Chuck E. Cheese. So we go to Chuck E. Cheese, and I always want to set goals with the kids. So we look at the toys first that you can win. What do you want to win? Dad, I want to win that. And I want, we need 10 years of tokens for that. That's not going to do it. We got 100 tokens. What do you want to win? Dad, can we try for that? All right, we're going to need 500 coupons. Let's go play. And we got our little cup with all little tokens, and we started walking around, and he starts playing the games. And after about, 5, 8 games, he just starts walking around looking at his cup. I go, you want to play this? No. You want to play this? No. Well, hey, Bear, this one. Now, you love this one. We shoot all the aliens? No. I go, Bear, what's going on? And he goes, Dad, I just want to keep the tokens. I go, you want to keep the tokens? He goes, yeah, Dad, they're gold. And he pulled one out. I go, Bear, they're not gold. He goes, yeah, Dad. And he goes to bite it. I'm like, don't bite a Chuck E. Cheese token. We don't have enough insurance for you to bite a Chuck E. Cheese token. I go, Barrick, they're not gold. He goes, yeah, they are, Dad. I want to keep them. I go, no, Barrick, look. It's got a picture of a rat on it. They're not good for anything if you take them home. They're only good for inside the rat's house. We play the rat's games and we get coupons. When we win the prizes, we can take the prizes home. But if you take these out of here, they're not worth anything. You understand? He goes, oh, yeah, Dad. I go, now what do you want to do? And he goes, I want to keep the gold. And Jesus pulls an e-brake on the entire show of Christianity. He goes, let me tell you something. Everything you have in your pocket and in your wallet right now, it's got a rat's face on it. It's only good for this house. And once you leave here, none of it counts. Let me tell you what to invest in. Let me tell you what this is good for. Everything you have is a tool to win people. That's the prize that's going to go with you. Don't fall for the fool's gold of the temporary here. You are going to waste your owner's possessions on this current assignment. Do you understand that? Yeah, Dad. So what do you want to do, Chris? I want to keep the gold. It's shiny. And when I have more of it in my cup, it makes me feel better about myself. He said, that's your right, son. That's your free will. But your dad's telling you what to invest in now. You thought Apple and Microsoft were good deals. Oh, boy. Understand what the cup is for. Wow. What a story. Father, may we be people now that simply learn to live this out. May you break the hold that materialism has on us. We keep grade and score and value and worth by the tokens in our life. And thanks for letting us know what they are about and what they're supposed to be used for. God, may you find us faithful with the little we have. So for eternity, we won't live with the regret and here, and I told you so. But simply, Dad, thanks for the advice and for giving us the strength to follow it out. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, as you go, it's this guy that didn't realize until the day he was getting fired, man, I got to start scrambling and do stuff different here. And he acted so shrewdly. Jesus calls him, yeah, it was dishonest, but the shrewdness should be applauded of realizing I better use this as a wake-up call for where I'm going next. I hope and pray, North Coast, that today was a wake-up call for some of us. It's Jesus saying, it's not too late. Start with what you have now and go, okay, where can I start using this on the Master's behalf? Not mine. What a great story. We get to do another parable next week. I'm so excited about doing it. You should have missed this week or last week because next week's going to be good. Until then, though, I hope you come back, turn around, and greet someone with a pocket full of tokens. We'll see you next week.